Upon its release, Assassin's Creed 3 was a huge deal. I remember it being the first video game trailer I ever saw in a movie theater. This is because it really was the culmination of everything that Ubisoft had been building to with the franchise. It was the end of the Desmond saga, wrapping up a story thread 5 years in the making. Up to this point, we've walked the streets in the Holy Lands during the Dark Ages, we've scaled rooftops in Renaissance Italy, and explored the beacons of culture that was Constantinople. And now, we are going into an open world time period that has never been recreated in video game history, the American Revolution. This is Assassin's Creed 3. For years online after its release, you could see that the game falls into the bottom half of most casual video game fans' Assassin's Creed list. People often accredit this to a myriad of reasons, such as not liking Connor, thinking that the story is paced poorly, especially in the beginning, or just not liking the American colonies as a setting. And while I can't technically say anyone's opinion is wrong, I can definitely say I disagree. Assassin's Creed 3 is a game that I genuinely love. As a big fan of history and also an American, I can always have an appreciation for the American Revolution. There isn't a ton of media set in this time either, at least comparatively to settings like the medieval times and ancient Greece. And that's understandable because showing military conflicts of this time can feel kind of silly. I mean, the musket isn't exactly the sexiest weapon, but Assassin's Creed 3 managed to make me love running around the stone streets of colonial America even more than I thought was possible. For me, this aesthetic of muskets and cuffed coats becomes just as synonymous with the series as Renaissance Italy. It established and defined a whole new era of Assassin's Creed. It makes me very nostalgic for the next several titles, so yes, this setting does have a huge novelty for being original in video games, but it's more than that. There's a charm to this world that I solely credit to its setting. They give you plenty of things to do in the world that feel worthwhile, such as the different guild missions where you might be investigating a sea monster in Boston, or participating in different brawler clubs and testing your fist against one another, or the classic Assassin's Creed staple of just running around the world and hitting every sync point on your map. These were all things that just gave me an excuse to explore every nook and cranny of these historic towns, and I had a blast doing it. Some things like the assassin recruits and the liberation missions could have been more fleshed out, so you feel like you're really building a relationship with each member, but I don't think they necessarily took anything away from the experience, so I'm not going to list them as a negative. The frontier is a really large aspect of why I love this game. Branching out and letting me hunt and explore in the woods speaks to the American pioneering spirit that I love so much. Exploring each region, trying to fill up my hunting log was so satisfying and it making me feel like a real frontiersman living off the land. Whether it was tracking down cougars or just running down deer, hunting always felt like a high point, and it really created a great bit of synergy for me between Connor's American heritage, the setting, and my own personal little fantasy. The parkour mechanics in this game were also an evolution of the series. They used a much smoother and more fluid system this time around. While it still has many of the same problems from previous games, I still like how they evolved it. Connor moves with a sense of speed that just flows very naturally. However, they don't streamline it so much that I can just climb wherever I want. I'm still looking and moving towards handholds while I'm scaling a rock face or the side of a building. I'm just able to do it faster now. Ezio feels more deliberate and precise with his movements, but Connor feels like water flowing around his environment, rarely slowing down. This works in both the cities of Boston and New York, as well as running around the frontier, jumping from tree to tree. Climbing around trees was a new aspect at this point in the series that just works brilliantly. With Connor being half Native American, it makes sense for him to be so comfortable running through the woods. But you add his assassin training and he becomes a deadly predator, stalking his prey through the woods. And for me personally, the forest areas right outside of the homestead manor, where you can jump off that rock, is burned into my brain because I did it every chance I could, and I loved it each time. I'll never get tired of trailing enemies from trees only to pounce from above in brutal fashion. This leads me to talk about the combat, which I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with. I found the combat relatively easy in this game. Not that I'm a master gamer or anything, I mean, I still get hit occasionally and even die, but the game never feels like it has tons of depth in terms of how you have to defeat enemies. However, there is a lot of variation in how you can defeat enemies. The animations in this game make it a blast to tear through redcoats. Connor fights with a sense of strength and brutality that no other assassin has. He feels like a soldier, thrashing around other grown men like it's nothing. And boy, do they give you plenty of tools to deal death. Whether it's a sword, hidden blade, heavy weapon, or my personal weapon of choice, the tomahawk, you have multiple animations based around killing 1, 2, or 3 enemies at a time. Mix that in with tools like the rope dart and the pistol, and you can get creative and pretty cinematic with killing enemies. The game doesn't do anything leaps and bounds different than the others, but they do add little touches like different tactics are more effective against brutes than, say, officers. You could probably get away with just spamming the attack button, but there's just enough of the enemy types for me to have to make one more mental calculation while fighting to figure out how badass I want to make a moment look. And of course I can't help but to mention how fun it is to use a Native American war club to bash soldiers' heads in. Overall, I think the game falls into a similar camp with the other titles. Combat isn't about making you overcome a challenge, it's about making you feel like a trained assassin. Assassin's Creed 3 does this brilliantly, by letting me pull off some of the most fun to watch kill animations in the series up to this point. I do need to preface, I'm playing the remaster on the Xbox Series X, and man, this game can be buggy. I had it happen so many times where enemies fly up in the air or limbs stretch out like putty monsters, and animations just being clunky and not even being close to matching up. You would think that this being a remaster that they would have ironed out some of the bugs, but I swear at times this game feels even more buggy than the original. I never had anything game breaking, but bugs occurred frequently enough that I found myself getting slightly annoyed. And I almost forgot. I can't not mention the naval battles. And oh boy, some people may not like this, but I feel like this aspect of the game didn't age well. Whenever I think of naval battles, I automatically jump to Assassin's Creed 4 and Rogue. That's because those games took this concept and really made it shine. It's interesting seeing the earliest version of these mechanics, but man, do they feel stiff. You also can't see all the time because of your cells, and you have less tools than you do in later games. I think this was a really cool idea that I loved at the time, but future iterations do it so much better that it makes this version feel stale. I did not complete every naval mission solely because it felt mechanically bare bones. If this is your first time playing through this game and you haven't already played future games, you might actually like it and find it to be a nice change of pace. But if you're familiar with the series as a whole, like me, you'll probably be yearning for Black Flag during these parts. To wrap up my thoughts on the mechanical design, I have to talk about my favorite system in the game, the Davenport homestead. Now, I'm a sucker for upgrading and developing a base in open world games. These always end up being my favorite portions, and I spend way too much time in them. Examples like the settlements in Fallout 4, the Kingdom in Ni no Kuni 2, Mother Base in Metal Gear Solid 5. I mean, the freaking villa in Assassin's Creed 2. These all work for me because of the strong visual progression of my base getting stronger, leading to a satisfying feedback loop of upgrading and improving it so I can watch it grow and over again. Assassin's Creed 3 nails the evolution from upgrading the villa to now having the homestead. You start out with a simple patch of woods in the manor, then you get intro to Terry and Godfrey, and from there you're pretty much off, finding tailors, hunters, and smiths, all to upgrade the homestead and watching it develop, adding buildings and farms and crops, and slowly watching it turn into a charming little town. What adds to this excellent system is how you gain upgrades from your friends, by them being able to craft goods such as a larger pouch for bullets or maybe even a second holster for 2 pistols. It incentivizes you to build up your homestead to increase gameplay capabilities. But to add a cherry on top of it all, this homestead has a narrative payoff. Each settler has their own plot thread that helps them develop and unlock these new crafting abilities, and all of their stories weave in and out of each other, creating the feeling of an actual community. It doesn't just feel like random NPCs on a map. Everyone has different personality types and desires and relationships with one another. Some find romance, some find a familial bond they never had. These are all threads I became invested in and felt joy in seeing how they all wrapped up. When looking at the story of Assassin's Creed 3, this game felt like it was the last time Ubisoft had an actual plan with what to do for the current day arc, instead of just these loose story threads they give us in later games. It's interesting doing this playthrough of the whole series in release order, because I feel the climactic buildup they created here. The whole current day plot was leading to Desmond trying to prevent the end of the world. This is the first game, in my opinion, where the modern day story felt truly important. In Assassin's Creed 1, everything felt novel because it was the original, so the Abstergo sections were fine. In Assassin's Creed 2, part of the plot is them training Desmond by living through Ezio's life. So it's kind of a bummer that all you end up doing is climbing around a warehouse. And then that's only slightly improved in Brotherhood by running around the current day villa. Then of course you have the weirdness of Revelations, but we won't really get into that. Assassin's Creed finally lets us see Desmond using the skills he's gained, like climbing around skyscrapers and fighting guards in Brazilian stadiums. I always look forward to playing these sections because they feel like a nice little unique break from the rest of the game. But you're still developing the main plot. I don't think this is the greatest part of this game specifically, but I do think it's the best use of current day we've had in the series. Now, in regards to the narrative, the real meat and potatoes here is based around Connor Kenway. I'm not going to go super in-depth on my thoughts about Connor specifically because my last video I made is all about that, and why I think he's an underrated protagonist, so go check that out. For me personally, the opening of this game is a super strong decision that they made to really focus on their story. By starting out as Haytham, you get this unexpected glimpse into a character that is charismatic, capable, and worthy of his own Assassin's Creed title. He has an almost colonial James Bond vibe to him that makes you immediately engaged with whatever he is doing. I've even seen where some fans wish he could have been the protagonist over Connor. I wouldn't go quite that far, but I would have loved a title based around his upbringing in England. This way we could have seen how a man raised by an assassin becomes a Templar. And yes, I know there are books, but I'm talking about a full game. The beginning of this game has created a bit of divisiveness over time, and I understand why. You spend about 2 to 3 hours with Haytham until you actually start playing as our main protagonist. And even then, once you start playing as Connor, you still have a couple of hours of tutorials before the game really gives you the keys to the kingdom to run wild. As someone who really loves video game storytelling, I love people taking chances and putting emphasis on their narrative. For this reason, I really enjoy how this game develops. I was fully entertained by the slow burn and just strapping in for the ride. And seeing Connor go from a determined and naive youth to a capable young assassin was also pretty cool. However, I can't understand how the several sequence-long beginning can really discourage people from wanting to replay the game. I'm also a sucker for stories that take place over chunks of someone's life, and they do a pretty decent job of showing that passage of time by having seasonal changes in the world as you progress. I would have loved to see a little more Connor transformation as he ages though. Maybe he has one model as a teenager, one as a new assassin, and then one for the later bit of the game when he's in his late 20s to 30s. It's a nitpick, but something I think would have added to help see the visual growth in Connor. Probably the thing I love most about this game is how it handles the relationships between Templars and Assassins. My complaints about the Ezio trilogy is that the Borgias are cartoonishly evil bad guys just trying to gain power. Haytham and the Templars have a different objective: peace through order. They seek to tame the colonies to prevent the escalation of bloodshed from a rebellion. They have no true allegiances to the crown and only see the British as useful tools in their own crusade. Connor also fights for peace, but by giving freedom to all. He believes all men and women deserve to rule over themselves. This ideological war between two factions is some of the best in the series. It really made me think and understand the points of both sides when looking at the debate objectively. They couldn't have made a better choice by having a father and son on the opposing sides. It shows their similarities, and we get this great monologue at the end from Haytham.
Don't think I have any intention of caressing your cheek and saying I was wrong. I will not weep and wonder what might have been. I'm sure you understand. Still, I'm proud of you in a way. You've shown great conviction, strength, courage. All noble qualities. I should have killed you long ago.
This is such a strong story about a man following his heart and fighting for the benefit of others when the odds are completely against him. While he can be prickly and moody at times, I can't help but root for him as an underdog fighting against tyranny. Assassin's Creed 3 is a game that many people have many opinions about. For me, this is a game that I will always look back on fondly, as a game that helped me fall in love with the franchise even more than I already did. But what I am curious about is, what is your opinion on Assassin's Creed 3? Is this a game that you enjoy and look back on fondly like me? Or do you think it falls short of how good the other titles in the series are? Let me know in the comments below, and as always guys, thanks for watching.